It's going to be 30.
Okay, so Farouk, hello, and welcome to our viewers. I'm afraid you've only got myself and Farouk today because AK and Yemi unfortunately can't join us for very personal reasons. So today we're going to be discussing a very interesting subject, and it's the subject of corruption. It's one that I encounter all the time when people speak about why we are underdeveloped. And in most of these discourse that I have personally encountered, Farouk, you probably be the same as you. The thesis is that corruption is the biggest reason why Africa is underdeveloped, and by extension, the global South. I have long contended that is actually not the case. My counter argument is that corruption is a symptom. It's not the cause of our it's not the primary reason for underdevelopment. And to better understand my argument, I think we'll just crack on. I don't know if you disagree or whether you support the thesis, Farouk. So, is corruption really the reason for Nigeria and the developing world's underdevelopment? What are your thoughts?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us again on Misaligned. Today, myself and Jabs will be looking into this rather topical issue. I'd like to frame my argument this way by stating very clearly and upfront that yes, corruption is a huge problem. It undermines us, sabotages us, takes away from public infrastructure, education, systems of governance and resilience that we need to develop. And I'd rather start this way because I want to put it out there very clearly to our audience that corruption is absolutely a problem. However, the question for today's podcast is whether it is the reason for our underdevelopment. And I would like to propose or suggest a different framework for looking at this matter. That something can be a problem, but not the problem, interestingly. And so, Jabs, I agree with you. I'm fully aligned with you that whereas corruption is a problem, it undermines us, it slows us down, it sabotages us, and it is problematic, very, very problematic. It is not the reason Africa is underdeveloped. And as we proceed with today's conversation, we would try and unpack this. And I think it will come across to many of our listeners as a very provocative position to take, particularly growing up in Nigeria, where headlines are about the billions stolen, politicians cutting away billions abroad, contracts being awarded and not being built, dilapidated infrastructure, overinflated budgets. People might wonder why, in the face of all of those headlines, and indeed all of those truths, we still hold that corruption is not the reason we are underdeveloped. I'm hoping that at the end of this conversation, we're able to create a shift in our audience in understanding that whereas all these things are problematic, and indeed we need to tackle them real time and ongoing, it's not the reason why things are the way they are. I'll hold it here for now.
So I think this is one of those days that I quite miss AK, because my gut instinct tells me if he was here, he would have been like, nah, 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 nah. Corruption is the biggest problem. I think EME is going to do 50-50 like he normally does. So I think you and I are completely aligned on this. And but I'm going to try and play the devil's advocate, because I think it's important that we reflect the common thinking on this subject. So Farouk, how can you say that corruption is not the biggest problem or the biggest cause of our underdevelopment, when in Nigeria, for instance, we have rats and snakes swallowing billions of public money devoted for infrastructure? So people take away billions of naira, they pack them in sacks, they put them in latrines, like sockaways underground. You may have seen, I don't know whether this was in one of the West African countries. I can't remember which one it was exactly. And there was this house. I can't remember whether it was one of their presidents or the son of a president or a leader, but never mind. It was a lot of money in a big house, and it was just stacks and stacks and stacks and stacks of money. And this is public money. So we say, oh, there are no infrastructures, we haven't got schools and all of those things. And if that money was made available, we probably will have schools. We probably will have drinking water. We probably would have, better energy infrastructures and all that. So how can you say, in the face of all this, this is aside from all the money that these politicians cart away to buy houses abroad, to buy luxury cars, and they take away billions that we don't see, and they put them away in Swiss accounts and in offshore accounts and all of those, money that you cannot trace. So how can you say that corruption is not the primary cause of our problem? I want you to talk me through what your thinking on this.
So it's I think it's a phenomenon that will take some time to unpack, and that's why we're on misaligned.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to use real life scenarios to try and explain. When we studied mathematics and sciences in elementary and secondary school, we were taught about the concept of holding certain factors constant and then varying others. So let's consider Nigeria, for example. I'm presuming that you and our listeners would agree that corruption is a constant. And again, a disclaimer here: I'm not by any means rationalizing or accepting corruption. My point specifically is that it's not the cause. It's not the underpinning cause for underdevelopment. It is a problem. So back to my point. Let's assume we hold corruption constant across Nigeria. What do you observe in Nigeria? Lagos and Abuja are more developed than the rest of the country. What do you observe within states? State capitals are more developed than the rest of the state, generally speaking. So when we look at that reality, what's the driving force for that difference in development between state capitals and other cities in the state, or between Abuja and the rest of Abuja and Lagos and the rest of Nigeria? The answer is simple. The Nigerian state has made a political decision to allocate more resources to Lagos and Abuja. So Lagos and Abuja have better roads, better infrastructure, better healthcare, better trained staff, better competence, better systems. So my thesis is that with more resources, you have more resilient systems, better governance, and even the wherewithal to tackle corruption. And I think when we look at the Nigerian state, the difference between Ado-Ekiti, Benin, Lokoja, and Lagos isn't corruption. It is resources available to those people. And the reason we have that difference in resources is that the Nigerian state, having identified Lagos as a historical federal capital territory, allocated more resources to it, as we are to Abuja today. So would you therefore, Jabs, tell me that the reason Lokoja is the way it is, or Ibadan is the way it is and Lagos is having metro line, the blue line, the red line, Apapa Port, international airport, is because the people of Lokoja are inherently more corrupt than the people of Lagos. So that's one way I look at it. Now, when we zoom out using this framework and look at the rest of the world, historically, the West, the geopolitical bloc we call the West, consisting of mainly the seven most advanced nations on earth, just constitute under 10% of the world's population. And they control 70% of the world's wealth, historically through direct rule, which we call colonialism. And then after the end of direct rule, through imperial structures like the IMF, the World Bank, and institutions like NATO, and even the UN Security Council. So the question is, what underpins our underdevelopment? I think is that system the West created, and that then led to them controlling over 70% of the world's resources, then meant that they allocated these resources to themselves and consequently denied the rest of the world this resource. And I think that's the fundamental underpinning and the fundamental driver of global poverty in the South. Again, I keep reiterating, because when you make this point, you come against resistance. Is corruption good? No. Is corruption undermining us? Yes. But is it the reason we are underdeveloped? The answer is no. The reason we are underdeveloped is that our resources are controlled by others, and that's why they continue to be developed. The reason Lagos is more developed than Lokoja is that Lagos has more resources than Lokoja. It has little to do with corruption. And there's an interesting link between resources and systems and competence and fighting corruption. So therefore, I would argue, and I'll put it to our again, going back to my framework at the national level, which I then expanded to the international level, I will put it to my audience today that, I mean, for those who are Nigerians, that Abuja, for example, and Lagos have better healthcare, better education, better teachers, better doctors and nurses, better anti-corruption mechanisms compared to Lokoja, which is the state I come from. What explains that? If you apply this framework internationally, therefore, the countries of the West, where we've all emigrated to, have better systems, more competent people, more resilient system, better governance, because more resources are allocated to those places. And we can unpack this framework and even bring it to a communal or family level. Imagine a grandfather that has left an inheritance for 5 sons. And one of the sons violently or criminally has taken all of the grandfather's land and cattle and businesses. And he uses these resources to raise his own kids. And then talk to the kids of his brothers and say, look, you are irresponsible. You are incompetent. You are corrupt. The girls there are leaving school early and becoming pregnant. That's a similitude of what's happening at the international level, where resources have been cornered via violence by a minority of the world. And that resource and wealth they've cornered, they've used to build systems and competence. And not just systems and competence to govern themselves, but systems and competencies to continue to extract and oppress us, so that we are in that perpetual state of servitude and deprivation, so that we continue not to have the resources. We need to build systems and skilled systems. And that competence and awareness they have, they also use it to educate us. So this narrative that the reason you are the way you are, that frankly, I believed all my life until I began to attend debates at the School of African and Oriental Studies in University of London in 2008. I took hook, line, and sinker that the problem was IBB. The problem were Shagari. The problem was Murtala Mohammed and all past leaders. And that's the reason why we cannot have electricity. We don't have tarred roads. We cannot build police systems, governance systems, have universal health care, universal education. That's not the reason. What corruption does is that the little we have, we mismanage it, and we must address that. But so I'll stop at that, and then in further segments, try to make this point better. Jabs, so you can add to that or challenge that as you may.
No, nothing to challenge, because this. I've been preaching this for the last 6-7 years, and the amount of resistance that you meet and the caricature of your position and people constantly coming out. And like you, we keep saying, we are not saying that corruption is not a problem. It is a big problem. It's a mighty problem. It needs to be tackled. But focusing on corruption distracts away from the primary reason why we are underdeveloped.
So just going back to that analysis I gave of an uncle that has cornered all of the grandfather's wealth. If you keep educating the other cousins that the reason you are where you are is because you drink, you smoke, you don't take personal responsibility,
you're
the
lazy.
little money I give you, the aid I give you to support your school fees, you eat it, you're self-sabotaging. It may be true that they are doing all that, but the reason they're in that position is because I took their inheritance.
That's right. You took 70%, you left them 30%, or even 85%, and you left them
inheritance 15. To develop the competence. And this kind of ties into conversations we've had on Misaligned before about free will, about events, proximal events that continue to reverberate and have impacts several years and generations into the future. The reason I had the education I had today is because my grandfather sent my dad to school long before I was born. And that decision continues to reverberate till today. So when somebody turns up in your land, kills your king, takes your sovereignty, installs a puppet, sets up systems to continue to extract, that decision, decades and centuries ago, continues to affect several generations that are yet to be born. Sorry to interrupt. I just thought I could highlight that link.
It's a very good point. Yeah, so you're talking about the legacies here now of colonialism, and currently we're in neocolonialism, because again, that is the same kind of system that keeps going on. But I wanted to return to the substance of education that you mentioned, because that again is really very important. Why? You were in London studying economics. Thousands of us, possibly maybe tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of Africans have been educated in this Eurocentric worldview, and it serves the core. We're talking about the imperial core, the G7, to propagate the idea, to maintain that idea, to sustain that idea that the reason we are underdeveloped is because we are lazy, because we are corrupt. Yeah, you remember David Cameron talking to the Queen and saying the African Nigerian leaders, I think you were saying, are fantastically corrupt, right? So that narrative is really very important, because those are the things you get taught in school. So the reason you're underdeveloped is because of corruption, weak institutions, abuse of human rights, internecine wars, and everything else. Apart from, they don't want to talk about colonialism. They don't want to talk about neocolonialism. By neocolonialism, I'm talking about the current colonial structures. Just that, obviously, they're not occupying your land. This is why it's called neocolonialism, it means a new type of colonialism. So it's true, they're not physically occupying our countries as colonies, but those structures have been morphed so that you are remote control from a distance. So they don't want to have any conversations about this. And you remember somebody like Boris Johnson, when he was the prime minister, he did say words to the effect that colonialism was beneficial, and it was a good thing that Britain did. He said about, I think, trying to punish people. I can't remember how now, but almost not criminalize anybody who talks against capitalism, because they are trying to challenge our way of life, our dominant economic system. So my point here is that in the realm of education, and we've talked quite a lot about education and why it's important, it's kind of why we're doing this. In the realm of education, it really is very important to dispel this notion that corruption is the primary cause of our development. Because the reason it's important is if you start to focus on that, because it's a symptom like we've been describing, if you continue to treat a symptom and not address the underlying issue, you're going nowhere. You're just going to keep giving this person paracetamol. And we're not saying you shouldn't control symptoms.
Let me jump in here. Let me jump in here and use my framework to try and explain to our audience why what you're saying is a very powerful thing. Jabs, you have said education is key. Because if we don't educate ourselves and get the awareness, you will continue to focus on the distraction rather than the main point. That's what you've said. Corruption is not a distraction. It's an important point, but I get your point. And using the framework I've done at the family level, at the state level, and at international level, can you try and explain to our audience what that family where the uncle has stolen resources, but is blaming them, blaming teenage pregnancy, alcoholism, drug use for their failure, what they might do? Or, for example, what the Nigerian state, people in Lokoja who look at Lagos building up and developing, what might we in Kogi State do? When Ekiti State do? How might we address our underdevelopment? Should we continue to self-hate and say it is corruption and it is incompetence and it is laziness? Or how should we catch up with Lagos? And then if you zoom that out to the global south and north, I think the solution can be weaved through using that framework. Can you suggest how that family, the nation or Africa and the world might begin to engage once this consciousness is gained to then bridge the development gap?
Okay. Hold that thought there for a moment, Farouk. You know, a long time ago, I read a book called The West and Us. It's written by a Nigerian intellectual called Chinwezu. That was like his PhD thesis. Another intellectual that I read about is Walter Rodney. He wrote his PhD thesis again was on the subject of, he said, how the West underdeveloped Africa. He was killed for that, by the way. He was assassinated at the age of, I think, 38 or 39. He was quite young. To go back to Chinwezu said something to the effect that Nobel laureate. So back in the 80s, he and Wole Soyinka used to clash quite a lot, and they used to write, intellectual columns and all that in Nigerian newspapers. And you remember that Wole Soyinka was awarded the Nobel laureate. So there was some conversation about that, and he was saying it was because, stay with me, it's a little distraction, but I'll square back to where we were. So his point was that Wole Soyinka's work does not challenge colonialism or neocolonialism. Therefore, they rewarded him. Whereas people like
Achebe,
thank you, Achebe, and he changed his name. He died not too long ago. Thiongo,
the Kenyan writer.
The Kenyan writer, yes.
Yeah, I can't remember his name. He died a few
He was called James. Yeah, okay. So you would know that those people focus so much on sort of like neocolonialism and colonialism and all of those things. Therefore, those people never got the Nobel Peace Prize. And so, Nobel Prize. So Chinwezu's argument was that the Nobel Prize is there to maintain this structure that we've been talking about. It's a neocolonial structure to maintain it. So why am I saying this? Because about 8, 9, 10 years ago, I got hold of a book called Why Nations Fail. Basically, it's a thesis about why some nations prosper and why some nations fail. So the people who, two of them, it was Darren something Robinson and Asimoglu, right? I was shocked because I read that book, and for a few years, I was like, wow, this is fantastic. The reason some nations are developed is because they have very strong institutions.
Free markets, strong institutions, democracy,
yes,
all
that's
that
right.
nonsense.
So that was their argument. And guess who got rewarded with the Nobel Prize in Economics last year?
Oh, they will be rewarded.
So they were rewarded, exactly. So it goes back to that point.
I'm sorry to use
One second.
profanity.
Yes, one second. But it goes back to that point that we're making just now about education, because in whose interest is it to maintain this idea, this notion, thank you, that the reason us are underdeveloped is because we have weak institutions. What caused the weak institutions? They didn't answer that.
Jobs.
Yes.
The reason, this is like, and I hope our Nigerian audience can key into this. It's like me writing in the Nigerian media space to say the reason Lagos is better developed than Lokoja is because they have stronger systems. They have more competent civil servants. They have better respect for the rule of law. They are more open. They are more democratic. And you begin to see how senseless that sounds.
Yes. I can see how senseless that sounds, because the thing is, they've been able to do that because of the resources allocated to them. Because if they get the resources, they can attract all of these talents.
They create a market. Everybody goes to Lagos to trade. They have the infrastructure. And how did the resources get allocated to them? Politically, by decision of the Nigerian state.
Correct.
And that's why it's important that our audience and all of us begin to see how the truth can be layered. So whereas it is true that Lagos will have more competent civil servants, they will have better systems. They probably are about the only state that have local government areas that can say we are running. To come and argue that the reason Lagos is Lagos and Lokoja or Ekiti is Ekiti is because those people are less corrupt, more competent, better systems. Is actually insulting our intelligence, or perpetuating or hiding the reason why Lagos is really Lagos.
Yes.
Which is that it has more resources.
Yes. Thank you. And I'm going to put it to you. This thesis has been put together not out of ignorance. It's not that they don't know about colonialism and neocolonialism and all this IMF and the World Bank and the WTO and all the inequality and the unfairness and the undemocratic nature of them all embedded. It's not as if they're not aware of these systems. I will put it to you that they know about these systems.
So let's go back to my hypothetical scenario.
Yes.
Does that uncle know he stole the grandfather's inheritance?
I'm sure he does. Yes.
Good. Does he want to keep the rest of the family distracted with why they are getting teenage pregnancies, while their kids are on drugs and hooked on alcohol, why they are self-sabotaging, why they are refusing to go to school, why they are not conscientious? Is he in his personal interest for him and his family and generations to come to keep them distracted?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And let's go a bit further. Farouk. Do you think that if one of those kids starts to tell others, this is what's happened, and this is how we can challenge him, this is how we can reclaim the things that have been stolen, might the uncle find a way to eliminate this individual who is trying to enlighten other people?
If that uncle had previously invaded other compounds and actually killed them, if he's a psychopath, there's no reason why he will not be consistent. Remember, we're not dealing with a benign human here.
No,
He's a human who's actually gone into another compound, taking it by force, who's sabotaged, who's done regime change, who's done in his own interest, continues to intervene in other members of the family. So just look to history. What has his uncle done before? What is he more likely to do? As we speak, there's an armada of American warships heading to the coast of Venezuela. So what has Venezuela done? They are not Arab terrorist Muslims. They are Catholics, over 90%. To my knowledge, they've never attacked the US.
No.
All they have is socialist democracy. And what that means is that the government, on behalf of the people, has taken the resources of the people into the hands of government.
Yes.
Which directly means that the symbols of neocolonialism cannot access those wealth. And when we talk about the symbols, they are multinational,
Farouk, stay
Chevron,
there.
Eon.
Please, Farouk, this is a very important subject that you're discussing, because I think our listeners need to understand this. Why is it a threat if Venezuela or Nigeria or another country decides to use its own resources to develop its own people? It's not going to attack the US. It's not, Venezuela is not interested in attacking the US or Canada or any of these countries. But why is it a threat if Venezuela says we're going to use our resources to develop ourselves? Can you please explain this?
It goes down to the fundamental question we're discussing here today. The flip of our counter argument is also true. And the flip of our counter argument is we are arguing that the reason we are underdeveloped is not because we're corrupt, it's because we lack sovereignty and we lack control of our resources. The flip is also true. Those that are wealthy because they control our resources.
Yes.
So when we take control of our resources through socialism, through state control, through coming together, not just to take control of the means of production, very important to arm ourselves to defend our control. It's a direct threat, not just to their profits, but to their prosperity and to their way of life.
Yeah.
And they will come after you.
Yeah.
And what's that system they are using to extract from you? It is the idea of free markets. It's the idea of free trade. It's that political and economic system that also has educated us that, open up, let the most capable come and till your land and take your resources and take your labor. But what they've not told you is that the most capable is actually more capable because it's actually taking your resources. So there is no competition, there is no equality, and there's no chance.
Yeah.
And in fact, the only chance people that are poor and downtrodden have is to form societal consensus at national level and take control of their resources. And the reason they come after you is that the counter argument is true. If resource control is the reason for your impoverishment, it is the reason for their prosperity.
Yeah.
And when you take your resources from them, and this is not conspiracy theory, this is logic.
Yeah.
When you take your resources from them, it's an existential threat to their way of life,
to
their control, to their profits, and they will come after you in many ways, as we have seen. Patrice Lumumba was assassinated. They will always find useful idiots, miseducated idiots, saboteurs, and traitors from amongst you, who perhaps are driven by other interests. They want to be president. They want power to use against you. But the fundamental truth is regime change, coups, assassination, war, destabilization to keep you where you are. And I made a note when we were talking about corrupt leaders. How come our most corrupt leaders are in bed with them? The chap in Cameroon is over 90. He's a darling of France.
Yeah.
Your guess is as good as mine. They rub each other's back. A conscious, aware, young leader who can bring his people together, who is conscious, who understands that the only path to development for his people is not aid and handouts. It's not because they are corrupt. Is to organize his people, take control of their land, nurse his people's labor to till that land, mine their resources and sell as sovereign people. They will eliminate that person because again, that is a direct threat. An important point we need to make here is the era of direct rule has gone. The world has moved on since the Second World War. Anti-colonial movement won that argument. We've moved to the more concealed
indirect
way of controlling. NGOs, multinationals, intelligence, loans,
control of media,
through the media, control of trade routes, a single international monetary system, trade siege, embargoes, and sanctions. Those are the subtle means of extraction these days.
And
this is
military force, 850 military bases around the world.
Yes. So these are the ways that resources continue to be extracted.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I'll stop here. And I mean, hopefully at some point we go to what can we do?
Yeah.
Realistically, pragmatically. We don't match in resources, in capacity, in competence, in experience. What can we do? What examples do we have around the world, and how we can deal with this?
Yeah. Okay. So I think we can actually go straight to this point, because I was going to make another point, but I've just realized now that we're 17 minutes to 8. So what can we do? So I'm going to approach this subject from this way. You see, if you continue to think that the problem that we have is corruption, and we've been thinking this way for how many years now, Farouk? We've been thinking this way for like the last 3-4 decades. Corruption. What's happened is just carried on increasing. The more we shout corruption, the more the corruption has increased anyway. The poorer our people are becoming. Another thing that they sell to us is they say, oh, you must make sure that the problem is human rights. You have to improve your human rights record. You have to do, respect LGBTQI. That those are the path to development. Yeah. And then they come with, oh, it's climate change. Those are the issues that you need to try and address. The thing you will never ever hear them talk about is, how do we control our own resources? How do we have true sovereignty? And when I talk about true sovereignty, I mean, because if somebody else is in charge of controls your resources, you are not sovereign. The whole point of sovereignty is that you control your own resources, you do as you like with your own resources. And like you correctly observed, if you control your resources, I'm talking about sovereign control, then you can never eliminate corruption. It's a human condition. Okay. So in spite of that, what you're going to find is that you're going to allocate more resources to building your roads, and that also would also impact on your institutions and all of those things. It's a no-brainer. That's the natural sequence or consequence. So the reason it's really very important to understand this is because it's going to altogether change the way we approach the problem. Because if you don't understand it, you are going to carry on doing what the West wants you to do, and they will never ever tell you anything that is going to empower you. Because like you correctly observed earlier, if they empower you, if they free you, if you get free from this system that has trapped you, then you impede their profit. Because what they're doing, this system currently is one that the extraction, the way they extract our resources allows them to subsidize their way of living. I don't know if I've explained this properly. So let me rephrase that again. So it's a subsidy system. So their prosperity is contingent upon us being down at the bottom. So we provide the cheap labor, we provide very cheap human resources, and then we are the markets for consuming for all those finished products. So they come back to us. And then any obsolete technology they've got, they will say, okay, there you go. You are not allowed to do chips and high-end technology. You're not allowed to do that, because if you do that, you're going to compete with us. That is the system. And they will use military force where necessary to enforce this order, and as well as economic sanctions. Therefore, this is also why education is really very important. And the only people who can educate us are ourselves. You cannot rely on going to London School of Economics and any of these other, Western institutions to learn about the thing that we're talking about here, because it's not in their interest to allow generations of Africans and Asians to go there and learn that actually the reason we're underdeveloped is not so much the corruption, the incompetence, the fact that we're just happen to be black and brown and just mentally inferior, but actually it's a deliberate system designed to keep it that way, because capitalist extractions requires that or demands that. So it really is very important. So do you think, Farouk, therefore, that Nigeria alone, maybe Zimbabwe, Congo here, you know, us working just in like our different silos with this understanding. Okay, so we've agreed now that it's not just corruption. So we're going to try and address this issue. How do you see that happening? Acting in silos, or do you think that?
Yeah, I mean, you've kind of identified the first key point. You have to frame the question right, so you're answering the right question. And it's the same answer whether you think of it as a family, whether you think of it as a country, and whether you think about it globally. So it's however you look at it. The challenge is done. So once education, framing of the question right, and then educating ourselves, and there is no other path other than coming together. So remember that family where the uncle has taken 70% and his kids are educated, they've got capital, they will inherit capital and be wealthier than the kids of the other people. And that will go on from generation to generation, because money makes money. Money creates systems. It breeds competence. It's an advantage. It's a domino. It compounds. So they must come together. They must ask the right question, come together, understand the challenges they face, address the issues they have ongoing, while recognizing that's not the reason they are where they are. So when I say address ongoing, we must address corruption. We must build systems. We must become more efficient. We must do all that. I keep repeating this because that's the greatest pushback you face when you try to make this point. No one is saying that Nigeria must remain corrupt. We must continue to waste. We must continue to elect incompetent leaders. What we want is for people to recognize that if we're able to control our land and resources, sovereign control, then we will be able to build the educational system, the healthcare system, the infrastructure, the internet, the roads, the rail, that will then underpin further prosperity, that will then build the systems that will enable us fight. So that's what that family must do. Yeah. They must come together, educate themselves, work together, address their issues. And ultimately, this may not sound benign, but I use the word ultimately, claw back control from that uncle. At the national level, we hear Nigerians talk about we need to restructure, we need to restructure. That's what many people are speaking to. They understand the injustice in the allocation of federal resources. And when I was young, I was very, very anti-restructuring because I grew up from a very Nigerian background, thinking that it must be federal. But now I recognize when people say restructure the country, it's about resource control.
Yeah.
To allow people control their own resources at local level. So again, the solution within Nigeria is the same. Restructure the country, give back control, give back resources. The poorer states and the poorer people, let the fishermen control their rivers and fish in it. Let the farmers in the middle belt farm their lands and mine their resources. The federal government can tax. It is the same thing globally. Nigeria cannot work as a silo. It's a challenge that is beyond us. So first, we must cooperate. ECOWAS, AU, the African Free Trade Agreement. We must build infrastructure among ourselves, become one market, one people, so that we can negotiate with this greedy uncle that took our inheritance and claw back control. We must work with people with similar interests, the Indians, the Chinese, BRICS, the Global South, to build new systems for loans, for investment, for technology transfer, for markets. China just offered all of Africa a zero tariff deal in the face of the American alternative of global tariffs. So we must identify allies, build infrastructure, ask the right question, educate ourselves, trade with ourselves, build wealth, continue to build structures for us to trade. Some of our listeners might wonder, if we say that the problem is sovereignty and control, why don't we just go back and say, give us? They won't give us. It's not going to happen. But trade creates wealth. Interlinking ourselves creates markets that are sovereign. expanding. If we build a highway to Congo today, and we don't build it with their money, and we don't pay loans to them for 100 years, and say we build it with Chinese loans or local technology, and we trade with the Congolese, that sovereign trade that creates wealth, that creates opportunity, that we retain. That's a market they've not penetrated.
Yeah.
So the importance of infrastructure and trade is key, is fundamental. The importance of unifying to create bubbles that we control the terms of, will make us more resilient.
Yeah.
Will make us more wealthy in spaces that are outside their control. And we discussed the emerging multipolar world and what opportunities it offers us sometime on Misaligned, several episodes ago. And this fits into this conversation as well.
Yeah.
So unite, find opportunities, find allies, trade, infrastructure, wealth, knowledge. And as you grow wealthy and you build systems, you must arm yourself to protect it. The reason we are where we are is because it was violently taken away. And we could not defend ourselves.
Yeah.
So you ultimately have to be able to defend whatever sovereignty you've got. Otherwise, it will be taken again and again and again and again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you see, on this episode of Misaligned, every time I talk about nuclear deterrence, people laugh. It's not a laughing matter, because the thing is that if you build the most advanced civilization and you don't have a means of protecting it, some guy is going to come and destroy that.
Oh, it'll be taken apart.
It will be taken apart. It will be destroyed. It will be plundered. Your people will be taken captive, which is what's happened to Africa, right? So I think, again, I can only echo what you say, which is that we need economic, integration, political integration, education, across the continent, infrastructural development. And I'll give you one example, Farouk. And I know that Buhari, when he was alive, got a lot of grief for building the railway between northern Nigeria and Niger.
The extension to Maradi in Niger Republic.
That's right. But you see, as a Pan-African, I thought that was a very useful thing to do, because that's the kind of thing that that's the kind of thing we're talking about.
I think we need a highway to Congo.
Absolutely.
We need a railway to Kenya, across the desert, all the way to our brothers in the east coast of Africa. You want to fly to East Africa today, you have to first go to Europe.
Yeah.
You're paying in dollars, which means the American banks benefit from your pay. The state rents from us. Yeah. You land in Europe, which means
you pay
for the infrastructure in Europe, and then you end up in Kenya. So 30-40% of that flight to Kenya is rent taken to us, taken from us by those that build the infrastructure we use.
Yes, absolutely. To go from here to Kenya, you probably have to go to Europe, don't you?
Yes.
And then come back. So not only just the time, but like you rightly pointed out, you're paying in dollars. Is somebody else that is benefiting? But I guarantee you, if Africa says we're going to start to trade in our own local currencies, the leaders who start to bring this idea forward are probably going to get into trouble with the West. And this is like a recurrent theme. But this is why you can't do this. You can't take on this fight we can't do it in silos. We have to come together. This is why we need this Pan-African integration and thinking and coming together.
Now you're talking about Pan-Africanism and the Africans coming together. I just want to highlight to our audience. We talked about how socialism, not national socialism, because that would be Nazi. So we talk about how socialism, how states coming together to take control of their resources poses a direct challenge to those who seek to extract those resources, and that's why they get attacked. In the same way, concepts of people coming together is always perceived as a threat.
Yeah.
So Pan-Africanism, Pan-Arabism, they say Islamic Ummah. So whenever a group of people have an ideology that brings them together,
Yeah.
it strengthens them.
Yeah.
And that is also attacked.
Yes. Yes. And
that is also a threat.
Yeah, that is absolutely correct. I don't know if you remember the AU, before it was AU, it was the Organization of African Unity. And this goes back, I think, to the 50s. And people like Kwame Nkrumah, they recognize this. He recognizes well. He was way ahead of his time. All these, leaders back then. In fact, there was a wave, you would remember, Farouk, in the 50s, 60s and 70s, there were so many waves of coups. Do you know why? Because those were the times when Africans took control. Even if it was only just some control, some political and economic control.
They were all taken out. All of them.
Thank you.
This is not for our audience. Yeah. This is not stuff of conspiracy theory. These are things that even foreign intelligence have come out to say, oh, we toppled Nkrumah, we were involved with Luamba. Waves of coups across Africa.
Yeah. So all of those coups were backed up.
Yeah. I think one, just to point out, first generation of post-colonial African leaders were very well aware that these people that just left directly did not want to leave indirectly.
Why would they?
They were well aware, but I think they underestimated the extent to which they would go.
Yeah.
In terms of coups, civil war, and actually assassinations.
Yeah.
And I think because they went that far, subsequent generation of African leaders got the message.
Yeah.
And they got the message, and that has kept many in line till this day.
Yeah.
Why end up like Patrice Lumumba or the chap in Benin Republic, when you can just lead, be corrupt, enrich your family and relatives, die and go? Why become a messiah or a martyr for the African people?
Yeah.
So that sent a message, and in a sense, I have a theory that entrenched the alternative, which is be corrupt, get away with it, with systems. It's acceptable. Absolutely. I live a good life. I go away.
Yeah. Thank you. And this is why I keep saying that corruption itself is a symptom, and it does help this system to keep going. It's like the oil that lubricates the joints and the wheels of this particular system that we're talking about. Because, like you said, why become a martyr? Why become a Patrice Lumumba who is going to be assassinated and your skin dissolved in acid and your teeth, sent to Bruges or to Brussels? Why do that when you can just sit comfortably in the presidential house for another 20, 30, 40 years, right?
And hand over to your son.
Children, enrich your
hand over to your
cronies.
son.
Yeah, and hand over to your son, and build palaces in Paris, in London, in all over, on properties and all that. Why do anything different to that? So enrich your cronies and basically just keep doing what the colonialists did, because those are their tricks, and divide and conquer your people, and just keep holding sham elections, and because nobody's going to disturb you as long as you allow your country, you allow them cheap access to the resources in your country. You devalue your currency, you prioritize paying debt, all of the things that IMF tells us to do. As long as you do that obediently, well, you're going to be safe. Well, why would you do anything different? And you're right.
How do we then? Let me ask this question. Let me be the devil's advocate. How do we end up with people like Lee Kuan Yew or even Modi in India?
Yeah.
Who will take a bit of beating for the people, or who would pursue sovereignty? How? Or the chaps in China?
Yeah. So I think it's a very good question, Farouk. I think, to me, before you can do that, you probably want to educate a critical mass of your people. The question is, how are you going to do that? Because, I think this is what we're here on Misaligned. Although we're having fun, this is what we're trying to explore. Because when you do that, your people will protect you. This is how I see this thing, right? This is how I see this thing. Because
Spot on.
Yes.
So that's why they're afraid of Pan-Africanism. People coming together.
Exactly.
In Venezuela, tens of thousands are signing up.
Yes.
For a militia to protect their government.
Yes.
In Iran, when they came under attack, the people came out to protest. the only resilience you have is the education of your people,
Correct.
because they
Correct.
cannot physically conquer you anymore.
Yes, but you see, why also it worries me a bit is no. Actually, I think we are making progress. But why it worries me a bit is, do you remember African Stream?
Yeah.
It's a small organization where there were journalists who were talking about African issues from African perspective. Well, guess who got threatened by them? It was Blinken. Blinken is the Secretary of State of the United States of America, feeling threatened by a very small few journalists, African journalists,
Out of
and
Kenya.
they banned it. They banned that organization. So they can't.
So,
They can't.
but going back to your point,
Yes.
if we do it at national level,
Yes.
if they see tens of thousands of Nigerians on the street
Mm,
saying we support our leaders' reforms,
mm.
we support his right to nationalize, and that can only happen when the Nigerian people understand what's at stake.
Yes. Yes.
Then they can't bully it like African Steam. And even if they did, they'll end up against a brick wall, like a robust rejection of that. I mean, it's difficult, but
So
I mean,
Farouk, I will tell you what.
India appears to be navigating it.
Yes, but you see,
Singapore.
the thing is, Farouk, you need to go back to history. This is why I think history is really very important, right? Because when you think about race, it's a social construct. There's no such thing as race. There's ethnicity. There's no such thing as race. It was created to allow the exploitation of primarily Africans and to stratify people. And in that classification, for those 400, 500 years, Africans have been right down at the bottom. We have arguably the richest continent, right? Therefore, and every single country, or let's say region, but also country, region, let's say, has specific job description, if I can use that language, right? In this setup. And places like, Singapore, some of these countries, if you remember again when there was the ideological battle between capitalism and communism, right? Some of those countries were actually allowed to develop just to prove the point that capitalism is a better system than communism. And so they were incentivized. So people would say, oh, but why is, I don't know, South Korea, or okay, look, if you look at North and South Korea, why is South Korea so developed? That's a testament to how important capitalism is. But no, that was part of the ideological battle, because they wanted to prove that capitalism is better than communism. So they sanctioned the communist North Korea, right? Drown it with sanctions, exclude it from this system, this economic global system, which they administer, right? So completely exclude it, and then support South Korea, give it, money and loans, same as Japan, just to prove the point that these countries, this is a better system. So this is why you have to look at every single country. You can't do this, look at South Korea and look at Nigeria, or look at Malaysia and look at this, because they all have different roles. So let's come back to Africa. Yeah. So in the case of Africa, our role is to provide cheap human resources, okay? Cheap natural resources, and big population, 1.3 billion people, the market. So they will allow some prosperity because they want to sell these products to us. But if they say they're going to allow Africa to become India or another country, again, with India, there is some. If you look at India, and people always compare China and the US. You need to be comparing India and China. Okay, first of all, geographically they're in the same planet, right? Same continent. They're neighbors, similar population, similar size, and one is capitalist, the other is socialist, right? But I don't know if you know that they've had border issues and they haven't, for a long time. So again, there is this thing about, oh, India is the biggest democracy, let us promote India. In the same way, again, they do to the Gulf monarchies. They always support these countries for very specific reasons. So my point is this: in the case of Africa, this is why I think that the only way out is it's a Pan-African solution, because if we escape from this role that has been assigned or we've been condemned to, if we escape, the whole system is going to collapse. There cannot be the West, the conceptual West, without the resources of Africa, without the exploitation of Africa. So they are determined by hook or by, you name it, all options are open, not just the sanctions, not just, the warfare, the assassination. If they have to bomb us, they will bomb us.
So Jabs, let me try and distill this in another framing that I hope will be less controversial. There is a disproportionate control of resources worldwide. A minority has taken most of it. That keeps us underdeveloped. More control for us, that keeps us underdeveloped and keeps them developed. More control for us will necessarily mean less control and less wealth for them. So they will do whatever they have done before.
I'm listening to you. Just carry on. Yes.
They will do whatever they've done before to keep that control, including directly taking control, indirectly controlling, sabotaging, undermining, assassinating, etc.
Yeah.
So that's what's happened before. It's established a system of advantage and disadvantage. Attempting to recalibrate it would lead to a reaction that will probably repeat all that put that system in place.
Yeah.
I think that's plain, that's logical, and that's backed by facts.
Yeah.
We are now saying that we remain underdeveloped. That also still serves the same system.
Yeah.
Because it then provides cheap labor, cheap resources, cheap humans to ensure that inequality, to ensure that the wealthy continue to live a subsidized life. Because should we rise, then the cost of our labor and our resources will rise, and it cannot afford us.
Yeah.
So there's also even that perverse incentive to ensure we remain as we are.
Yeah.
So there is then that two incentive now to argue that. Again, going back to my framework, that rich uncle still wants the rest of his family to remain poor because, well, for some reason, they provide house girls and house boys and megats for him. Anyway, well, that's a consequence of the system he set up because he stole the money. The reason they are the way they are is because he took their inheritance. But then there's now another reason in that because they don't go to school and they are not serious, they can be his megat and house help and his cook.
Yeah.
Similarly, rich states like Lagos may have that perverse incentive where it's okay for people of Niger to be poor, for people of the north to remain poor and come and drive Okada and be shoemakers and be nail cutters. Because that can make them feel like big men. But that's only a consequence of the system that has been set up. If it is Lagos that set it up, I'm not accusing Lagos. I'm only using that framework to explain. The Nigerian state set it up.
Yeah.
So at the global level, for our audience, that's what's happened. The powerful nations of the world, essentially European power, set up this system and control most of the wealth. Ab initio. But then there's now this perverse incentive where under capitalism, efficiency, you can drive efficiency and profits with cheap labor. So there's that perverse incentive that you remain where you are because then you can be source of cheap labor. And again, this is just logical. Imagine owning a factory. You want the cheapest labor, you want the cheapest resources so that you can make those margins. I just thought I should reframe all that way. And so closing thoughts, Jabs.
No, so I agree with you. So I don't think that this is going to change just all of a sudden. If you look at China, you know, one of the things that Chairman Mao did was that he completely took control of the education system. You can call it brainwashing, because in the West we say it's brainwashing, okay? But that's what they did. And that was a time for them to look inwards. But that was also a time that he brought about the idea or the notion of loyalty, pride, restoring pride and dignity in these people. We need something similar, right? So, but how are we going to achieve that? Because the trouble that we have across African, you know, continent is that the systems that are now in place are almost there to incentivize and to reward, you know, mediocrity. You know, it's difficult because the people who really want to go and make a change is so difficult because it's so expensive to run elections, and you know, godfatherism and all of those kind of things is really very difficult. But I think my hope is in the kind of things that we are doing here, and I know that there are many different people who are making these things, and I can see a change. I can see a change. I think these days when you speak, you can. It's not as difficult these days when you explain this to people, for people to understand, because the videos everywhere, you know, materials everywhere. So I think that the message is getting through, because I feel that when a lot of us understand these things, we have a chance to bring these changes about, such that, okay, look at Burkina Faso, for instance. You know, you can see how much people are thinking we are going to have to protect Ibrahim Traore because we believe in what he's trying to do. And then they say, oh, he is like Thomas Sankara. Who was Thomas Sankara? This was what Thomas Sankara did, right? So it almost becomes like a pan-African thing. And this was why channels like African Stream were very useful, because they were spreading this idea and bringing, platforming people to come and talk about this and explain the system. So I think that the work has already started, has begun. But in an ideal world, we would want like a revolutionary way of doing this, which is that you get revolutionary leaders who will come and have this pan-African thing whereby
We'll speed it up.
Speed it up, exactly. And then not just speed it up now, but it's actually more organized and more deliberate, which is we're going to say, right, what do we need in the area of education? What do we need in the terms of mass media? You know, how do we control mass media and these narratives? What do we do in the field of economics? What do we do in the field of military? How about infrastructures? Do you know what I mean? It's got to be deliberate and organized like that. So I think that is lacking. But
So
my feeling is,
would you therefore be encouraging our listeners to say, educate yourself, gain consciousness,
absolutely, yes, absolutely,
and get involved, attend
absolutely,
local town hall meetings,
absolutely.
be involved in
Mm,
what's happening in your local community, in your village, in
yes,
your local
yes.
government, in your states. Join Pan-African Voices internationally.
Support them. Listen to their.
And in your place of work, in the organizations you lead, share the understanding, implement, and just get involved. We need to organize and organize and organize and coalesce. And at the right time, there can then be a movement
Yeah.
that can have enough people to deliver.
Yes. 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 I am hopeful. I agree with you. I agree with everything that you've said there. I think that the most important, if you ask me what's the most important job, I would say educate yourself. And if you wake up, educate the next person next to you. And if that person wakes up, they will educate another person. And you will just have a chain reaction. I am hopeful. I think it will take time, but I think that I'm hopeful that I think that the next generation is better informed, I think, than the older generation.
Yeah, so it's I think before this episode, my thinking was that myself and Jobs were very much aligned on this issue. It's not always been my view. I started off believing that once we fought corruption and brought it to a standstill, we will solve all of Nigeria and Africa's problems.
Mm.
I came from a tradition of self-blame, self-criticism, and even almost self-hatred. at just the sea of group failure I grew up to meet as a young Nigerian and African. That failure or our inability, as I prefer to frame it these days, remains pervasive and appears to be worsening. But as I've educated and enlightened myself, it's become obvious to me that the reasons are very complex. Fighting corruption, improving efficiency, making the best choices at every point in time remains what we must continue to do. But we must now begin to ask the right question, address the right question, to even begin to develop what I call situational awareness. If you're still in a place where you feel the reason Africa is underdeveloped is because we have leaders for life, we don't have democracy, because we are corrupt, I would argue that you still don't have situational awareness of the global political and economic system. Mm. And having that situational awareness is in my view, the first level of consciousness before you even stand a chance at addressing the problem, because you will not even know what is hitting you if you don't have an awareness of what's happening to you in time and space. And so it is very, very important that we gain this consciousness and understanding that sovereignty, resource control are key, and that there's a reason we don't have them. And the reason we don't have it continues to be the reason we are denied any chance or any attempt at organizing to have it. And that for the sake of our own kind and our people and our continent, we have no other alternative other than to pursue this path of control and sovereignty. There is no other alternative. Contemporary examples are the Chinese, and many, many of the Southeast Asian countries. Will argue the Malaysians, the Indonesians, the Bangladeshis, and many people will argue that these people had the opportunity of breakthrough because the empire was distracted with Middle Eastern wars and conflicts. Whatever the case, that's the way forward. We must organize, we must unite, we must educate ourselves, and we must continue to build trade, build wealth, and protect whatever we have. So those are my closing thoughts. And thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Farouk. I think that corruption is a big problem. It's a really, really big problem, and we must do everything to tackle it. But it's not the fundamental reason why Africa and the global south is underdeveloped, because when you look at the map, up until the rise of China, the developed parts of the world are the former colonizers. And there's got to be a reason why the rest of the world is poor, and just like you said, 10% of the world's population controls 70% of the wealth on the planet. Yeah. So this wasn't done. This is how God designed it. It happened by theft, by sabotage, by sanctions, by assassinations, and by simply just bombing countries to smithereens. So that's how it happened. That is a system that's also designed to keep Africa exactly where it is, and which is that we provide the cheapest resources, human resources, natural resources, and we are the market or the consumers of finished products, and a place where obsolete technologies are dumped in the name of foreign aid and foreign assistance. So if we understand this framework, I believe only then can we truly get sovereignty, as well as be able to free ourselves from the shackle and develop ourselves. I think that until we realize this, we will only continue to treat symptoms. And what are those symptoms? It's they tell us that the reason we're underdeveloped is because we're corrupt. Some people even go as far as saying that it's because we're just genetically inferior, and other reasons are things like weak institutions. Why would we have weak institutions? They never explain it. So I think it's time to address we need to tackle this problem from its root. No point trying to deal with symptoms. Much as it is important, I recognize that corruption is a big problem and we need to treat it. I can't overemphasize this, but doing that alone is not going to get us far, because it's a symptom, and it's important for this machinery to keep working. So that's the framework I want us all to start to consider and to go away with. And like I said, there is no, just final thoughts, there is no Nigerian solution, a Ghanaian solution, Zimbabwean solution, Angola, Congo, or any of the 54, 57 African countries that we have. There is no, we cannot carry on working in silos. We need a Pan-African solution in the area of economic integration, political integration, education, military integration, and that is the only way we can develop. So I want to thank all our listeners for joining us today, and please drop us a comment if you agree or misalign with us. We would be very pleased to hear your thoughts. So all that's left for me to say is thank you very much for tuning in today. And thank you, Farouk. I enjoyed it. Thank you. Cheers.